Okay, so the online people, can you hear me? There's something wrong with my mic, it says.
Yeah, ma'am, we can hear you.
We can hear you, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to try the microphone in class. Let me know if you can hear me. The ones online, can you hear me?
Now we
No,
can
you
hear
are
Yes,
not
ma'am.
audible.
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Acha, chale. So I can hold this. Okay, is this okay now?
you.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. It's okay now.
All right, so today we're gonna start with your grading scheme. And here's how it's going to look like. So 40% final, 40% is your quizzes. And this will be n-1, okay? So if you're in touch with, keep reading as we go on. So for example, for this week's reading, you have Iman and Islam. And by the way, last semester's book, you can order that, you can borrow it from a friend. It's going to be completely the same, okay? There's no difference in that. You can use that if you want. You can get your own copy because it will always help you. That's my opinion of it. It's going to help you in the future as well, right? If you have your own copy. All right, 10% is CP and 10% is one assignment or two assignments at most. Okay, so if it's two assignments, it'll be 5% each. Probably just. Is it because I moved? पहले से नहीं connected, and I thought it's connected. Okay. Ji, please help out with the connection. I have no idea. Also, there's also. IT person को बुलाना होगा. There was a remote here, but उसमें ही मसला. I think IT doesn't even know where to find the IT person. उनको ले आए. क्योंकि ये I don't think he left the remote here. I think he took it with him. Power off. We were trying to connect the projector. I think we should call the IT person. I don't know. Hold on. Let me just pause the recording meanwhile. We're going to begin with the video we saw yesterday, which was on judgment. Water. ठीक है, so जितनी देर में projector हो रहा है connect उतनी देर में we can start talking about the video we saw yesterday. ठीक है, we spoke about the video one where connected to the projector. So, अच्छा that discussion that we started yesterday इनको side पे करना है. That discussion was it was supposed to be continued today, and that's basically on judgment. Okay, so what do I mean by judgment? When I say that I'm judging someone, there are different ways to look at it, right? So those of you who are online, at least they can see this. You guys can see it in a few minutes, inshallah, probably 5-10 minutes. So when I turned this on, that's when this started, and I hope it doesn't cause a problem. Shall I? Right. So what do we mean by judging others? Having an opinion? Is that it, or is there something else included? So let's suppose somebody does something and you have an opinion about whether they should or should not, or whether it's a good idea or not. That is an opinion, right? But what do you mean when you say that you're judging someone? क्या ख्याल है आपका? How?
Ma'am, it means,
जी जी जी. I can hear you.
yeah, it means that if someone is doing something right and wrong, and that right and wrong is decided, like that's something certain.
Um,
Ma'am, we can also judge on the basis of experience. I mean, when we have experienced such things, we can judge very easily others.
no, but the thing is, okay, my question is, if you're judging someone, remember when we saw, have you all seen Jahil Awam by now? Everybody was online, I think around 83 of you. Okay? So that was, yani you're pointing out something wrong that somebody's doing. Okay? Now, when I say that I'm judging someone, okay, and let's suppose you've been in the same situation and you did better and you expect the other person to do better as well. But the idea was that if we are doing something right in one arena, okay, we might be doing something wrong in another arena, okay? Ab how are we going to judge ourselves as well? Because judgment में अपनी बात भी आ रही है. You had a point to make? नहीं, अच्छा. So how is it different from just having an opinion? That was my question. Is it my opinion plus something else, or is it just my opinion? And somebody ended at G. I think you're
Miss, when we judge someone, it is that we are using our
G वाले पे.
we're using a certain criteria to judge someone else's action. Like we're not just giving an opinion, we're judging them, we're imposing something on them. Like we're setting a criteria on their actions.
Ma'am, when we judge someone, we reduce their intentions and make an image of themselves in our mind. An impression.
Yes, ma'am. Based on their actions, we judge that. We decide what a personality that specific person might have.
Making a
Ma'am, judging is
comparison with ideal
always in
situation that we have created.
ma'am,
Maybe
judging is
not
always in
allowing
a
the
negative
benefit of the
way.
doubt. Maybe not allowing the benefit of doubt to the other person.
Okay, can you hold on 1 minute? I'll just connect this. ये मूव किया तो तब हुआ था या पहले ही हो गया? यानी ऑफ कनेक्ट नहीं हो रहा या ऑन नॉट फाउंड? क्या बजा सकते हैं? अच्छा, so the ones online are participating more. If you guys can participate because I can't. Any participants?
Ma'am, we cannot hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now? I wasn't speaking till now. Ji, can you hear me? So Hamza can go first.
Ma'am, you're not audible.
The connection. Could it be when I connected it to the hotspot?
Now it's fine.
इसलिए कि अगर आप आईडी के नेट से कर दें हॉटस्पॉट में जाए तो ये इसको तो चल नहीं रहा था कनेक्ट किया हाँ जी तो चल नहीं रहा था हॉटस्पॉट से कनेक्ट किया इसका इतना मसला हुआ अब आप क्या चाह रही हैं कि आईडी से कनेक्ट ठीक है Okay, can you hear me now? Those of you who are online. Also, ये पहले connection इनकी मतलब you could hear everybody online yesterday. वो भी हो जाए हाँ जी.
Ma'am, can you hear us?
Ma'am, you're not audible.
Um, Ma'am, can you hear us? But we cannot hear you actually. So can you speak something now?
Ma'am is saying that there's a problem with her mic now.
All right. Please keep your mics sorry, muted, not unmuted. Make sure your mics are muted, okay? And if you have to speak, you can unmute and then make sure you mute them again, okay? All right, so here's what you can see, grading scheme, and we can discuss it later as well in the semester, okay? Let's come back to judging. Let me wrap it up. Actually, it's not really that important. The reason I brought it up was because one or two of you said yesterday that there is one hadith, right, that mentions Amr bil Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar, which means that you encourage people Well, literally, if you look at Amar, it means to command. So to command goodness and to stop from something that is not good. Okay? From munkar means something that is disliked, something that is wrong. Now, that concept is actually in the Quran as well, right? So Amr bil Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar comes in the Quran itself, not just Hadith. When we take that, the idea we think we get is that if I see something wrong, I can just stop the person and I need to stop the person. And if, I get a chance to tell someone to do something right, I must do it. ठीक है? अब उसमें होता क्या है that there's a difference between practical and the theory. So theoretically, yes, that is exactly what we're meant to do. And the reason is that, like I said yesterday, that being a Muslim means that you're saying that this is the truth that I believe in. So it's a worldview. It's not just, a part of, and you know this, right? That religion, that deen, according to Islam, is not just something that you do, in the private or at one time in your life. It's actually a way of life, right? So Islam is always defined as a way of life, not just a religious, not just do's and don'ts of religion, not just something that you take up time for, for a part of your life or a part of your day. It's actually something that should essentially sort of change your habits, the way you think, the way you look at the world, um, throughout your life, okay? And 24 hours of the day, ideally, okay? So when this happens, होता क्या है that people retaliate, यानी कि अगर आप ऐसे करने लग जाएंगे तो because you saw कि जाहिल अवाम की वीडियो में होता क्या है that if I'm saying that this is something that you should do, then I'm also doing something wrong, and then that same person can turn back and say कि तुम तो ये सही नहीं कर रही हो, right? You might be doing this, so and so. लेकिन so for example, people who pray, this is a famous drawing room discussion. A person who might be praying 5 times a day might be lying, might be dishonest, ठीक है, might be hurting others right and left. तो लोग कहते हैं कि फायदा क्या है फिर उस नमाज का, ठीक है? So what is the idea कि आपकी ओपिनियन जो है ना किसी भी चीज के बारे में वो तो होती है, सबकॉन्शियसली वी ऑलवेज हैव एन ओपिनियन अबाउट समथिंग, ठीक है? सो आवर ओपिनियन शुड बी गाइडेड बाय नॉलेज, पहली बात. सो इफ यू रिमेंबर जाहिल का ट्रांसलेशन क्या है, इंग्लिश में क्या कहते हैं? Ignorant, ठीक है?
Ignorant.
Yeah, someone who doesn't know any better. Ignorant means they're not aware. There's a lack of awareness. There's a lack of knowledge. ठीक है? Information नहीं है, knowledge नहीं है, awareness नहीं है. Now, what's going to be interesting is your Iman, Islam, and Ihsan reading, your first one. Has anyone looked at the package, maybe from a friend from last semester? कि नहीं? अच्छा. तो उसमें, I think your second reading has it. Ignorance की बात है, ठीक है? It's going to keep up coming, so you have to keep that in mind. And especially decline of knowledge जो आपका article है, जो it comes in the middle of the course somewhere, ठीक है? Ignorance is that one vice of humans that they can easily get rid of, because all you have to do is get knowledge. All you have to do is get awareness, right? And because we fail to do that, we fall into ignorance, okay? In fact, the entire Islamic paradigm is based on this. What Islam essentially says, and our fitra, remember we talked about fitra yesterday, the covenant that we made with Allah when we saw Him and we said, yes, you are our Lord. That memory, wherever it is in our, back of our minds, we don't remember it, but our souls, the idea is that our souls remember that. So what the prophets have done throughout history is that they have tried to get rid of this ignorance. They've tried to sort of remind Muslims, they've tried to remind human beings, okay? The reminder lekar aate hain. So what do the prophets do? They remind. ठीक है? इसीलिए आपने जिक्र सुना है ना, बहुत उर्दू में तो सुना हुआ है जिक्र, आपने कि ये जिक्र कर लो, वो जिक्र कर लो, राइट? या विर्द आप सुनते होंगे. But literally the word zikr actually means remembrance, to remember. So when you're saying do zikr, or when you're saying say subhanallah, alhamdulillah, what are you saying essentially is that you remember the truth simply, ठीक है? For example, अगर बारिश किसको पसंद है? I think all of us desi people love rain because यहाँ कम होती है, right? So if you're a person from London and you get sick of rain there because it's always raining, ठीक है? But usually we like rain, ठीक है? बारिश होती है, पकौड़े बनते हैं मीठे या नमकीन. I don't know if you know मीठे पकौड़े. I recently got to know them and they're really yummy. So remembrance is basically that you remember that, I don't know if you know this, there is a surah in the Quran called Surah Ar-Ra'd, which means thunder, okay? And it goes that there's an ayah, there's a verse in that surah in which it goes that the thunder praises its Lord. Okay? So thunder hai kya? It's the sound of lightning. Okay? So वो जो sound आती है ना, when you hear that thunder, whether it's a low rumble, whether it's like a loud boom, that is remembering or praising its Lord. ठीक है? So what does that entail? कि आप यानी when you hear thunder, you remember all the scientific details behind it, but you also remember that it might be a design. Everything is a design, right? The fact that water is a source of life is a design, etc. So everything sort of reminds you. अब हो गया है वैसे हम ये चाह रहे थे कि ये कनेक्ट उन्होंने जब किया तो उसके बाद ये चल नहीं रहा था माइक माइक चल नहीं रहा था अब इसका चल रहा है लैपटॉप का चल रहा है तो इट्स फाइन आई थिंक इसको कनेक्ट करने के लिए वैसे नेक्स्ट टाइम के लिए जो भी मसला हुआ है मतलब इसको अगर कनेक्ट कर लें इसके साथ पॉसिबल है कि नहीं है
कर सकते हैं इसकी वॉइस वो पिक कर लेगा आपका जो
जो
लैपटॉप का माइक है ना
अभी ना करें क्योंकि बड़ी मुश्किल से अभी स्टार्ट हुई है क्लास बट नेक्स्ट टाइम ओके the soft copy of the package actually we just have like maybe I should get the soft copy made. I'm not sure how to do that. I just have like 50% of the stuff online okay, on soft copy which I can provide. But chale, let's come back to that later. Okay, let me start again from Iman and Islam. So what is the difference between these two? Aman and the root letters are Seen, Lam, Meen. So salam kya hota hai?
Salamti.
It's a greeting of peace. Hanji,
Peace.
it's a greeting. Yeah, so it means peace. Now Islam is different from salam, right? Yani you can hear the different sort of I mean, the way that you say it, Islam is, I mean, agar sirf peace hi hota to salam kehte, right? So Islam is actually from, you wouldn't know this, but if you know Arabic, coming from the bab if'al. I'm not going to ask you this particularly, but bab just means that if it's on the wazn of if'al, it sounds like if'al, right? So Islam sounds like if'al. It means peace through submission. Okay? That's the idea that you're getting. So it is peace through something. Okay? Somebody's mic is on. Can you please make sure it's muted? Okay, thank you. Peace through submission. And what is Iman? It was the articles of faith, remember? From yesterday. Okay, so believing in Allah, believing in the angels, believing in the prophets. Now, if you look at the definitions, this is to do with believing, and Islam was to do with actions. Okay, so it was telling you the 5 pillars, which are essentially what? Actions. Can you see the difference between these two? Yani, agar main kehti hu main mu'min hu, right? If I say that I am a believer, we never really think about it, but we say I'm a Muslim, right? That actually connotates that I'm also mu'min. But then why do we have these two different words? That's the question here, okay? So even in the Quran, even in the Hadith, you're going to have both of these words. You have mu'min, the one who is a believer, and you have a Muslim, the one who's a Muslim, okay? Why do we have these two different words? Now, if you look at the 5 pillars that we have, okay? Sorry for the drawing, but yeah, I mean, board nahi hai. So what is a pillar used for? These are 5 pillars, okay? What is the function of a pillar?
Holding something.
To support the foundation.
Bilkul.
Act as a
To support.
foundation for a building.
I'm holding the roof.
Yes, support. Now, if you just have pillars and you don't have anything on top, what would that entail? Would that be something interesting or no?
That would
Which
be of no use.
It will be
because
incomplete.
Yes, ma'am.
It will
there are
collapse.
certain. Sorry, क्या? It would collapse. अच्छा नहीं. अगर pillars हाँ मतलब अगर pillars ना हो किसी चीज के तो वो collapse कर जाएगी building. ठीक है? But if you just have pillars and you don't have anything on top of it, they're not supporting anything. Is that
It will be
Of no
pointless.
use, man.
And it's
it would
pointless
be
Pillars are
to
for no
use the
use
pillars.
actually.
Pillars are useless then.
Pillars are not
ex-
fulfilling their purpose.
आवाज कट रही है आप लोगों की but yeah we got the idea. देखें एक exception मुझे जहन में आ रही है. Let me know if you think it's right. You have these famous ruins in which you have just these famous pillars, these very humongous, huge designs, of beautiful architecture. People go and look at them, right? So they are famous tourist spots. Why? Because they're just beautiful in themselves. Okay? That is one exception you can say कि pillars मौजूद है उसके ऊपर कोई building नहीं है. They're not supporting anything, but in themselves there's some beauty in it. ठीक है? That's just one exception. Otherwise, you would say that well, pillars are just pillars. They're meant to support something. There has to be a building on top. ठीक है? So keep that in mind. Now look at the articles of faith. So this is to do with believing. How do you believe? Do you believe with your mind or your brain or something else from your heart? ठीक है?
Heart.
Hard.
And everybody knows this is not the physical heart. Everybody knows it's not the heart that's
Yes.
pumping blood.
Mind.
It is a spiritual heart, yeah. So everybody, I mean, in every language, this heart, when you talk about the heart, that the heart is with what you might, feeling ki jo baat hoti hai. And of course, you can argue कि नहीं, psychology. Some of psychologists would say that it's actually the brain that's doing everything. ठीक है? That's a long discussion. It's not something that everybody agrees on. ठीक है? I mean, the brain does, but people would argue that the heart, the spiritual heart, is what is causing these chemical reactions in the brain. The source कोई और है, ठीक है? अच्छा. So this heart we're talking about is something else. It's not tangible. Not tangible. So not the physical heart. And like I said in the Arabic language, it's called the qalb. Okay, the spiritual heart is called the qalb. So now if you look at Iman and Islam, what it sounds like is that Iman is more to do with the inner, something that is intangible. And Islam is to do with some, actions, something that can be seen, something that can be observed. Okay? So that's the difference. And in fact, throughout the 1400 plus years of scholarship, you have had scholars talking about Iman and Islam to no end. Okay? It's a discussion that keeps on going, and hopefully, we hope to sort of do that discussion with you guys. Okay? And if you take interest, then it can go on for even the first 5 sessions. Okay? It really depends from class to class. So your readings are also going to be on it. But if you look at it, let me. So again, let me put this down and ask you, what do you think comes first? Like, let's suppose there's a person who says that I want to become a Muslim. Okay, so let's suppose they study Islam and they say that I'm interested and I want to become a Muslim. What do you think came first, Iman or Islam?
Iman.
Ma'am, Iman will come first.
Iman.
Okay. Now, interestingly, all of you have different answers. I heard both. Okay, some of you said Iman, some of you said Islam. Now, why is that? I'll take one answer each. So somebody who said Iman,
Mr.
Can you
Daspi.
please explain? Please
Ma'am,
ask. Okay, just a moment. The ones who are online, before you unmute and start speaking, please raise your hand. Okay? Otherwise, everybody starts speaking and we can't make sense of what you're saying. Okay? So if you can hold on, I'm asking somebody on site and I'll let you know. and keep you in the discussion. Ji. ठीक है. Okay, so your name again? Okay, so Ma Siddiqui is saying that if you have belief, if you believe in something, your actions are going to flow from that. Okay, so you can only say I'm a Muslim if you actually believe in all the tenets of faith. Otherwise, how can you become a Muslim? Anybody who said Islam first, can you explain your choice? Ji, आपका नाम भी? Okay. Okay, but from what you're saying, it sounds like you were keeping in mind a Muslim. Yani, for example, so a Muslim would actually act on everything from before. Even when we are born Muslim, we just do something without really understanding. But then the belief sort of comes later. Okay, so that is the good. So when we're distinguishing this, it actually does depend on the circumstance. Yani, so here what we're saying, so Fatma, what she said was that, well, for a Muslim, usually what happens is that Islam comes first and then Iman sort of becomes stronger. You have to work on it and then you believe more. Okay? And here you can say that a person who is a new Muslim. For a new Muslim, when you look at what's happening, usually, again, you can think differently and you can give your opinions. Okay, so I'll take some online students as well. For a new Muslim, you're going to say that, well, I think belief came first, and then, they said that I want to go ahead and act on the pillars as well. Okay, so I will take, how about Varda? Ji, Varda, can you please unmute your mic if you have something to say? Okay, Nimra. Nimra, you have your hand up?
Miss, yeah, I wanted to say that even if we are Muslims and we just pray namaz just for the sake of praying it, and we believe that we actually have belief in ourselves, but we don't. So I think it's sort of pointless, because it's not pointless, but the thing is that the main pillar is shahada, the belief. But if we don't have it in ourselves, so what do you think? That just praying namaz is enough, even if we don't have that belief in our heart?
Okay. So what I'll put here is that Islam without Iman is pointless. Okay? ये मैं
Ma'am,
यहाँ
I
लिख
have
देती हूँ.
something to add on this.
Yeah, not even pointless, but it's something incomplete, I believe.
Okay. Sorry.
Ma'am,
I would
maybe because that's why people say that you have to find Islam even if you are Muslim. You have to discover the roots of what brings you to Allah. Like you have
right.
to, your heart should be convicted towards your Lord.
बिल्कुल ठीक है. Okay. Now there's one thing, Iman comes first because belief is important. Munafiq at the time had Islam, but okay. So Muhammad Abdullah Khan has written here in the chat box that a munafiq is the one who has Islam and no Iman. So what I'm going to put here, जो निम्रा ने mention किया था, I'm going to put munafiq here, which is called a hypocrite. ठीक है? Because you see, what you said that I would actually agree with when you said pointless. Okay? It's not just incomplete. In fact, incomplete would be the opposite. If you have Iman, you do have Iman, but you are not acting on it. So this would be incomplete. Okay? Whereas if you have Islam, if you're acting on something with no Iman at all, with no belief in Allah, no belief in the Day of Judgment, then it is pointless because you are a hypocrite. Why are you acting on it? Unless, yes, I mean, exceptions har jagah hote hain. I'm going to take your on-site questions or comments. Let me complete this. कि देखिए, exception हर जगह होते हैं. It might be that a person who is interested in Islam. So I do have a reading by Naima B. Roberts. It's actually in your second last module, ठीक है? And she wrote a book on, all her sisters in Islam, not blood sisters, how they accepted Islam. And they're from all over the place, yani they're from different countries, different races. So वो जो किताब है, it's called, what was the name? I can't remember. From My Sister's Lips. Okay, so it's the stories of her sisters and she's put them all together. She mentions that one of them, for example, started praying and started fasting just because she was intrigued. If she saw her Muslim friends fasting and she felt that she wanted to try it out, she didn't think that she's a Muslim or she didn't believe in everything, but she wanted to try out the action itself. Okay, so pehle fasting usne try ki, then she started praying, and eventually there was a time when she believed. Okay, so in that situation, you're not gonna call her munafiq. She's just doing the actions because she's doing the action because she's interested. It's not because she wants to fool someone or she doesn't believe and she just wants other people to think she's a Muslim. That is what a hypocrite is. And by the way, that brings us to, before I take more of your comments, this is also part of the course, so let me put it here, that a hypocrite in action, hard to write with this, versus belief. Okay? That in the time of the Prophet, the hypocrites were actually hypocrites in belief. ठीक है, यानी कि वो believe नहीं करते थे, and they just, time of the Prophet, ठीक है, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they just acted. Sorry, from the. Okay, right, exactly. They, हाँ, उसकी पूरी story है कि उन्होंने मस्जिद भी बनाई, मतलब वो पूरा एक fool करने का उनका plan था, right? It was like a conspiracy. Nowadays, for example, अगर आप किसी को देखते हैं कि वो नमाज पढ़ रहा है, रोजे रख रहा है, लेकिन सही मुसलमान नहीं है, उसका इस्लाम कंप्लीट नहीं है, you know that by getting to know them, etc. ठीक है? अब आप उसको मुनाफिक नहीं कहेंगे. We do have that misconception sometimes. You're not going to call them munafiq per se. They're not hypocrites per se because they're not acting like a Muslim while not being so. ठीक है, तो इसकी exact definition ये है. और आजकल you don't find this because you don't really have any benefit of being a Muslim. ठीक है, I mean you actually, if not, I mean, instead you probably have a lot of issues. ठीक है, you might not get a visa somewhere, blah blah blah. If you have a beard or if you're doing niqab, etc. ठीक है, that is a possibility. So nobody's really a hypocrite in belief in this day and age. But yes, sometimes a person can say, "Okay, like I'm confused in my iman. I'm confused if I really believe, but I'm still praying. So I feel like a hypocrite." हो सकता है ना ऐसे. In that situation, you're gonna say you might feel like a hypocrite in action. ठीक है, तो scholars ने ये differentiate किया that a person might um, feel at a certain point in their life that they are a hypocrite in action. So now sometimes I make these connections for you so that when we get there, you'll remember. There's a biography of Imam Ghazali in your reading back. Okay? He interestingly actually went through a belief crisis. Okay? When he was at the prime. So he was a scholar in his 20s, like in the middle of his 20s. So early on in his life, he became a very, very famous scholar because he was extremely intelligent. Okay? So he has like 200 students and he's teaching them. And suddenly he says, I stopped teaching because I couldn't teach anymore. I spent a few months having these doubts. And these doubts were not about, some logical, thing that he's explained to the students. This doubt was about belief. Any basic belief. How do I know what is true? This is why he actually, ended up studying philosophers, and he studied philosophy for around 2 years, and then he wrote a book on the incoherence of the philosophers, which is very interesting. So we'll get there, okay? But this is how I want you to be making these connections throughout this course, okay? Imam Ghazali is talking about feeling like a hypocrite in action, sort of, okay? In which you are doing something, but you're not really sure if you are a believer, okay? So so this is today. आजकल यानी इंसान hypocrite in action perhaps हो सकता है, but they can work on it. It's something that is like it's not a stage, it's not a station, you can say, right? It might be a stage and it might change on and off. Whereas hypocrite and belief, this is what, when the Quran talks about a munafiq, it talks about this kind of munafiq who is actually voluntarily posing to be something that they're not. Okay? That's very different. Acha, that clarified, hopefully.
Ma'am,
Uh, Ji.
Islam without Iman is possible or not? Or Iman without Islam,
Islam
both?
without Iman. That's a good question. Let me put this here. ईमान जो है ना उसको थोड़ा और डिफाइन करते हैं, ठीक है? There is a hadith that Iman has 70 branches. There are different versions. One says 60, one says 60 plus, one says 70. And a lot of times in the hadith as well as the Quran, you do have this notion of using a particular number, and you don't really mean just 70. You mean a lot. Okay? So Iman has 70 branches. If you look at this example, I'm not giving you the entire hadith. There are different hadiths. एक उसमें ये आती है. I'll get to that actually. First, let's do this. एक दरख्त जिसकी ज़्यादा शाखें हों, ठीक है? And it covers more, gives more shade. It has just more foliage. वो ज़्यादा खूबसूरत होता है या something that has less branches?
Something that has more, a lot of
The one
branches.
with has more.
The more.
Even if it doesn't have leaves on it, even if, let's suppose, you're in a country in which in the winter it's not an evergreen plant, it's not an evergreen tree, and it sheds all its leaves, जितने ज़्यादा branches होंगे फिर भी वो खूबसूरत लगता है, doesn't it? It's very interesting. It doesn't have to be leaves as such, but branches per se makes a tree look even more beautiful. But yeah, essentially वो shade ज़्यादा देगा, more animals can benefit from it, there might be more birds in it, it'll give you more oxygen, etc. ठीक है? So the more branches there are, the more the tree will benefit, the more it'll look beautiful, etc. So if Iman has so many branches, the question was, what if is it possible to have Islam and no Iman? So again, that brought us to the discussion of hypocrisy, right? Of hypocrites. I think the question that Hidayatullah was asking was that for a Muslim, is it possible that you have Islam and no Iman? ठीक है, उसमें I would say again, for you to be defined as a Muslim, you must have Iman. That is the definition of a Muslim. It is possible that you might have 0.1% Iman. ठीक है? The idea is that your Iman might be low. यानी ये नहीं आप कह सकते कि ईमान है ही नहीं, आप ये कहेंगे कि weak है. You might say that yeah, a person has weak Iman. Maybe they just worked on one or two branches and it's just not, full enough, right? That's possible. And there's a beautiful hadith that, matlab, ba muhabra, I will say, it's not exact words, but the Prophet said that your Iman does increase and decrease. So a Muslim's Iman, it does increase and decrease. This is something which is bound to happen throughout your life. There are different incidents, there are different stages of our life. Sometimes we are, at leisure. Sometimes in Ramadan, we might be feeling more spiritual, and then suddenly we're not feeling spiritual. We may go through a test which may increase our spirituality, or it may actually make us further away from Allah. Right? So it's something that goes up and down. तो पहली बात ये है. अच्छा, दूसरी बात, now another interesting theoretical point about this is that in the Quran and Hadith, whenever Islam and Iman come together means in one ayah or one hadith. Okay? So I'll put it here. Yani one verse or one hadith. For example, Iman has 70 branches. Is hadith mein sirf Iman mentioned hai, right? Islam isn't mentioned, only Iman is. But in the hadith of Jibreel, which we did yesterday, both Iman and Islam are mentioned. When they come together, it's interesting that there are different connotations or there are different nuances कि उनमें जो यानी थोड़ा सा फर्क है वो आपको नजर आता है. ठीक है? And this is what we began this session with, that what is the difference between Iman and Islam. But interestingly, जब ये अलहदा आते हैं, so for example, in this hadith, only Iman is mentioned, ठीक है? और इसकी जो दूसरी मैं आपको बात बताई थी, एक और वर्जन जो है हदीस का, उसमें ये आता है that, बल्कि वो इसकी वर्जन नहीं है, चले हाँ, एक वर्जन आता है, you might have heard of it, that haya is shu'batun min al-iman, that haya or modesty is a branch of faith. ठीक है? Now, how do you define haya? It's actually वही बात है कि it's very comprehensive. Haya is a modesty. It means bashfulness. It means, again, scholars कैसे define करते हैं? Terminological definition in the Islamic paradigm is that haya is essentially जो top grade haya है, ठीक है? That is in the modesty that you feel in front of Allah, knowing that He is Allah, knowing Him to be who He is, and knowing your own weaknesses, and knowing your own insignificance and your faults and your weaknesses. ठीक है? So actually ये जो modesty है वो क्या है? That it is, what an abd. We're gonna come back to this important term as well. An abd is a slave of Allah, right? How many of you find that demeaning? I mean, it's unfortunate we do find it demeaning sometimes, and we don't really understand what it means. And this is what we're gonna do in the next week, inshallah. We're gonna come back to this. Abd is actually one of our foremost identities of being a human. Okay? Why is that? Because you see, when you are the abd of Allah, when you are the royal, that's why you call it a royal slave actually. You don't just call it a slave. There's royalty in the slavery, because if you are not the abd of Allah, if you don't recognize yourself as being an abd or a creation of Allah, what happens is essentially you become the abd of something other in the world. That is the Islamic understanding of it. Yani, by definition, the human being loves something or someone. ठीक है, आपने poetry में भी सुना होगा. I'm forgetting it right now. I don't even know who wrote it. But something like that, the heart was made to love and it will love something or the other. Okay? Now it's your job to decide who you want to set your heart on. ये इसमें भी discussion हो सकती है that do you really have the power to do that? Like, is it really in your control? ये भी आएगा, ठीक है? So free will and predestination में भी ये बातें आएंगी. ठीक है? How much is in your control? ये बात भी आएगी. Okay. So when they're together, you're going to notice, the hadith or the Quranic ayah will talk about the different nuances of Iman and Islam. ठीक है? और अगर वो अलहदा है, जैसे Iman has 70 branches, then what? Then Iman and Islam will be interchangeable. Yani there won't be any difference in them. Why is that? इसमें भी एक
Miss, can you
hikmat है.
please repeat this point?
Yeah, okay, I'm repeating this. So there's wisdom in this as well. That when Iman and Islam are used separately, they are interchangeable. ठीक है? यानी एक हदीस में जहाँ ईमान सिर्फ ईमान mentioned है, it may also be talking about Islam actually. यानी it will sound as if it's the same as Islam. So for example, एक और है कि Islam is to and I'm forgetting, but it's all in your reading pack as well. So I'm forgetting if the word Islam is used here or Iman is used here. But there is a hadith in which it's mentioned that maybe some of you may have heard it, कि रास्ते से कोई तकलीफ दे चीज उठाना. So you pick up, maybe you see something on the road and you pick it up so nobody gets hurt. That is the least level of, I think it was Iman. ठीक है? और वो इसीलिए इंटरेस्टिंग एग्जाम्पल है कि ईमान तो बिलीफ था, ठीक है, और ये तो एक्शन है. आपने रास्ते से एक तकलीफ दे चीज उठाई है, that is an action. But the hadith mentions it's Iman. ठीक है? So they are used interchangeably. So what it sounds like is that, well, if you have Iman, you should also be doing this action. So Islam and Iman are equated. ठीक है? This is what I mean here, that there's wisdom in this, that when they're used separately, they are interchangeable, which means they are same or they are equal. They are equated as if they are one and the same thing. ठीक है? So we'll end here. If there are any comments or discussions, I'm going to just
Excuse me,
I'm
ma'am.
going to begin with this. Hanji. Ji Abdullah.
Ma'am, can you just brief me about the readings, ma'am? At least reading for this week or the upcoming week?
Okay, so reading pack you can get probably by Monday or Tuesday, inshallah. Okay, from the photocopier. The first reading
Ma'am,
is
Ma'am, actually, we are
Ji.
outstation students, so we will need it in a soft copy.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, we are outstation students.
Okay, so
ma'am,
the Compendium of Knowledge is the book. I can give you the PDF for that. It's really hard to give you the exact pages, but let me work on that, inshallah, because I did have that in my mind last semester. And let me see if I can get a soft copy made. Okay? So Compendium of Knowledge is your first reading. This is actually the name of the book. And the reading is simply, I think, Islam, Iman, and Islam. If I'm not wrong. I don't have it in front of me right now. But you can give your orders at the photocopier and you'll get it by Monday or Tuesday, inshallah. Okay? Acha, so read that by next week. We'll continue our discussion on Iman and Islam. If you've read the readings, you can ask me questions on it and we can continue our discussion and so that you understand it more. Okay? So that on a practical level, you can see what it means. It begins with the hadith, so do make sure कि आप अभी पढ़ लें बजाय इसके कि आप quiz का wait करें, ठीक है? It will make the semester more interesting. आपकी learning ज़्यादा होगी and साथ साथ फिर आपके जो questions हैं वो answer आसानी से हो जाएंगे, ठीक है? So inshallah, get the reading pack and do the reading by next Friday, inshallah. So I'll see you next Friday. Is there
Ma'am?
any questions?
Yes,
जी.
ma'am. Ma'am, the hypocrite in belief whom Quran talks about, ma'am, उसके बारे में questions हैं मेरा.
Sorry, Quran talks about क्या? Sorry.
Hypocrite in belief जो था एक.
जी.
मैम इसके हम एक एग्जांपल इस तरह ले सकते हैं कि मैम एक एनिमी स्पाई है तो वो हमारी टेरिटरी में आया है लेकिन वो हमारे जैसे ही काम कर रहा है लेकिन उसे हमारे मुल्क से कुछ अफेक्शन नहीं है ख़ास तो हम उसे हिपोक्रेट इन बिलीफ कहेंगे.
अच्छा वैसे आप जो बात कर रहे हैं यानी बेसिकली यू सेइंग कि आज के ज़माने में इन टुडेज वर्ल्ड इज इट नॉट possible that there might still be a hypocrite, right? There might
नहीं
be,
मैम
I mean,
एक एग्जांपल
जी sorry,
से मतलब मैम एक एग्जांपल
example
दे रहा था.
example there was, sorry आप example दे रहे थे?
यस मैम.
कि आज के यानी आज ऐसा हो सकता है, right? Or you're talking about the time of the prophet?
मैम मैं एक एग्जांपल वैसे ही दे रहा था कि हम इस चीज़ से रिलेट कर सकते हैं इसको कि एक मतलब एक एनिमी स्पाई है वो हमारी कंट्री में आया उसे कुछ खास अफेक्शन नहीं है हमारी कंट्री से लेकिन वो फिर भी हमारे जैसे ही काम करता है सारे तो उसे हम हिपोक्रेट इन बिलीफ कह सकते हैं.
बिल्कुल सही है, बिल्कुल हाँ जी ऐसा है. यानी वही मैं बात कर रही थी कि बिकॉज यूजुअली जो डेफिनेशन है ना हिपोक्रेसी या munafiqeen ki, that is actually particularly for the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is what the scholars have said. ठीक है कि जो जिक्र आता है ना कुरान में मुनाफिकीन का वो उनके लिए आता है because for them it was even a bigger deal that they saw the Prophet, they lived with him, they could see the type of human being that he was, and even then not only were they just disbelievers but they even went on ahead and posed to be something that they're not. They deceived the Muslims. So उसी तरह आज you're right that it could be, it's I don't know how common it is or what, लेकिन ये कि yes theoretically that's right कि एक enemy spy है वो आया है और वो they're just posing to be Muslim for an ulterior motive. Yes, that is very much the definition of hypocrisy. ठीक है? In belief, yes. So that's a good
Okay,